Welcome, sunflowers, to Good Journeys Tarot. I'm Rosemary, and this is 78 cards in 78 weeks, where I am exploring each card as I go through and mock up what I want my cards to look like in my own deck, as well as write up my entries for my guidebook. And today we are going to be looking at the star card if you haven't been paying attention on social media, and all of the things associated with it. This week, we really didn't have anything new come into our lives from a tarot standpoint, but an interesting thing did happen. Yesterday, I went and had my nails done, mainly because I didn't want them to break before an event I have coming up in a couple of weeks. And so I wanted orange for some reason. I don't know why. And I have this idiosyncrasy where I have to know the name of the color that I get. And so this one was called Egyptian Goddess, which is a weird connection to the star card because this morning, as I'm still studying this card, because there's a lot of information out there, I happen to be reading in the Book of Maps for the original SKT, Spirit Keepers Tarot by Benabel Wynn. And she was talking about why this card was traditionally depicted nude, and that is because of its association with Nut, or the goddess of the sky from Egypt. And so, Egyptian goddess, the star card. Interesting connection that I didn't even know the universe was going to give me until 5 minutes ago. I want to say welcome to everyone who's popping in. We've got Tarot Stash here. Hi. And Dancing Soul Sister, whose name I knew last week, but this week I have already forgotten, and I do apologize. I always tend to refer to people by their channel names since I don't have a personal interaction with them and remember their names. I'm very bad with names unless I talk to you face to face on a regular basis. So apologies. So this card, the star, has been one that's kind of been a huge part of my tarot journey. It's the card that I always looked at when I went to purchase new decks early on to see if I liked it. And it had to be right for me in those early days. In fact, the very first tarot deck I ever purchased, I only purchased because this image was on the box. There were some other images on the box as well, and I didn't realize until after I got home and attempted to study the tarot that they were all major arcana cards. This deck could have been so much better had they not made it a pip deck. Or if they had at least made the pips stylized like the Marseille, that would have been beautiful. But it's just a number of pips on cards. And this is the Golden Tarot by Liz Dean. I did enjoy the book. I tried reading this with this for a while, and then I ended up having to replace it with an RWS so that I could actually learn the cards. But now that I've learned them, I'm fine with reading with pip decks, and I still go back to this one like I did this week over on Instagram. Because I just loved this deck. When I was first learning tarot, I was still very much trying to hold on to my Christian past. And so the stained glass kind of effect, that kind of cathedral look that this deck had, was really appealing to me. And while I did put it away for about 10 years while I studied the tarot, I have gone back to using it on a regular basis. Another deck that I only purchased the deck because I love the star card was the Dream Raven Tarot. And the Dream Raven Tarot is one of those that, pretty much everybody has to trim when they get it because it has these hideous green borders that just kind of wash out the cards and just waste the beautiful images. And this is a pretty card, but I don't read with this deck a lot because they're almost all just ravens, in particular scenes. And some of them you can't even tell apart once you cut the borders off. That's why I left the titles on the bottom. But I did love this card, and that's why I ended up getting this deck. So some new people have popped in. Patrice is here, and of course Gerald. And I'm so glad to have all of you with us as we talk about the star card today. Um, this is the urban tarot, which kind of places the person in a cityscape. So rather than standing in a river, they're standing in a puddle. And it's a really pretty image. I do love this deck. I'll say if this deck was tarot size, I would be reading with it nonstop. But because it's a little bit bigger, I only pull it out once in a while. Um, Personally. Here is the Pocket of Peers, and in case anyone is interested, this is actually Chris Ann Donnelly, creator of the Lightseers deck and various other decks that you're all familiar with, depicted in this star card, with the focus being on inspiration and creativity. It's a gorgeous image. And most decks stick with the imagery that we get from the Marseille of the woman kneeling by the water with the stars in the sky and a bird in a bush. And there's a lot of discussion about what kind of bird this is. Most people um, say we don't know what the bird is. The bird's a different color in every deck in antiquity, and so sometimes it's black, sometimes it's red, sometimes it's white. Now, some people will state definitively, "Oh, it's an ibis," and others are like, "Maybe not. Maybe it's a crane or a pelican or something else." But the fact that it is a bird that typically lives by the water and is present there is something that we'll talk about. This is the gorgeous Numinous Tarot. Now, this star card bugged me for the longest time because I could not figure out why on earth they chose on the scarf, and I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but they put the earth symbol on the scarf, right? And at first I thought, oh, well, maybe I'm just looking at it wrong. Maybe it's the air symbol for Aquarius, and the scarf is just hanging crooked. And then I realized yesterday when I was looking at this image, I had forgotten to pull it out. Um, that the reason is because this person is actually floating on a cloud in the sky. And so this is the way of working in that connection to the earth. That is important in the star card because the star is not just about the air associated with Aquarius, i.e., this is Aquarius, this card, the water bearer, uh, but is also about the connection with the earth and with the water, which we're going to talk about more. Here's my Rider Waite, one of my go-to decks that I love working with. The cardstock on this is just phenomenal. It's that linen finish cardstock that I love. And I like the way they actually don't show the person in this card. I think because they were trying to get away from nudity, and so they use the water bearer type image. If it worked for the star in the middle, it would probably be a little confusing, perhaps associated with temperance. And there is an association between these two cards, and we'll talk about that a little bit. The temperance card is more about balancing, things, and about alchemy, the creation process, whereas the star is about freedom, and it's about pouring out of your spiritual gifts onto the world and through your emotions, connecting with the universe. That's kind of that Aquarius influence coming in, that kind of social consciousness, helping others, that type of thing. And so whereas temperance is typically traditionally clothed because they are still hiding part of themselves and they are working on creating outside of themselves, the star is nude. Well, for two reasons, which we'll talk about again in a minute. But one of those being that they are free spirited, they are pouring themselves out, and they are open to the world, versus the temperance card. I do love the cards in this deck, though. I haven't studied the deck yet because it is a completely different astrological correspondence system. This is the whole Tarot of the Holy Light, and it's a pretty traditional image, right? Except for you'll notice that the stars are all little suns, and I thought that was a really cool idea. And I thought briefly about doing that, but then I'm like, well, that might confuse it with the sun card. But truthfully, stars are suns, right? Our own sun is the star of our solar system. And so I thought that was a cool idea. As I've said repeatedly, this is Aquarius, the water bearer. And so in the Minoan Tarot by Laura Perry, my friend and mentor, she depicted it as a water bearer in Minoan culture. Some more modern decks just depict the night sky with a star. There's the Spacious Tarot. This is a deck that I don't work with much. I did finally break down and get it because some of the images in it are just fantastic. The Modern Love does something similar with the two people. And because this is about relationships, there are two people staring at the night sky. And this is an image that I more associate with the moon than with the stars in my own deck, but an idea still that I drew on. I just love how they animated the star in the Mystic Medleys Tarot. And now we're getting to some cards that had some really cool ideas. Some of the ideas which I want to work into my star card eventually if I haven't already, and some which I didn't, but I'm going to look at. One of those is from the Bonestone and Earthflesh. There's actually a very long entry in the guidebook about the story behind this figure and who they were and how they were like the inspiration for their tribe, the hope for their tribe. And so the idea being that the guidance that we receive from the star is not coming from externally, but from internally, from the things that we have learned and we have realized through the troubles that we have just come out of, i.e., in the Devil and the Tower. And so I like that. And you'll see there are actually wings on the background there, notating that kind of air energy. And this is a beautiful card. I looked at this card a long time while I was waiting for the deck. All of the images were available for us to look at in the Facebook group back then. And I'm throwing cards at you. In the Light Seers deck, there's this idea of connecting with the star, capturing a star, tying your heart to a star, that idea of wishfulness there. So this, along with the other celestial cards, is why I originally purchased this deck, which is the Mystic Garbage. Each of them are personified in this way, with the head being the planet, the sun, the moon, or the star. And there's an interesting thing that was done with this, which I showed when we talked about the Three of Cups, is that these three figures were dancing together. And I really, really loved that. And so I am going to try to figure out how to connect the images in my deck between the Celestials, although I don't know how that's going to happen because they're very different cards for me personally. Finally, I'm going to be showing you the Spirit Keepers Tarot. This happens to be the Vitruvian edition. The Revelation edition was changed and doesn't have the same impact as this one, but this one has stuck with me. Like, this was a card that was very important to me. And the star is depicted with the tower in the background. And in my reading, there was actually someone who said, it would be really cool if the tower was in the background, because this is supposed to be the card of healing and of hope after coming out of all of that trauma. And so seeing the tower restored and rebuilt brings the idea of healing to this card. And I like that idea. But we've not actually explored the tower yet. And so I don't know what the tower would look like. But I do have space on my card that I could put a version of it in the background if I wanted to. But otherwise, this is a very traditional type image, other than the fact that they are depicted clothed. And this is where I found out that information about Nut, the goddess of the sky. I was looking up this card, and she was talking about how even though she clothed them, there was symbology on the clothing that associated this card with Nut, which is the goddess of the sky, often depicted as a water bearer carrying water on their head. So also basically associating them with Aquarius in a way. And so this has been one of my favorite cards for a while. Apart from the fact that they were clothed, that it's just one of those cards where you're so used to seeing it nude that you think it needs to be nude to get the point across. Which I guess really isn't relevant when you're using silhouettes to mock them up the way I have been doing. So welcome, Ange is here. Ange will be here next Sunday to talk about a card. We'll find out what card that is at the end of things today. Um, Hannah, I don't know if you know this, but there is a sketch version of that deck available on Make Playing Cards. It's very pricey, very pricey. But it's pretty. I probably wouldn't have gotten it if I hadn't have gotten this deck simply because they removed the leaf that is on the title. And so some of the, let me see if I can find it. Oh, here it is. So they've removed this leaf on those versions, and it just has the words, and the words are off center on some of them. And so that for that reason, and the price, I mean, it's like really expensive for me. Almost $100, I think, for a sketch version from Make Playing Cards. So, and I know it's because they're trying to make some money in addition to allowing it to be printed. So, getting all off track now. So glad that you all are here. So let's talk about this card, the star, a little bit, and about the various symbols and things in it. I took a little creative license. I gave her pink hair so she would stand out and be different. I chose to make my bird white, even though it's unclear from many books what kind of bird it is, because sometimes it's a black bird, sometimes it's a red bird, sometimes it's a white bird. Everybody points out that this is an 8-pointed star, but I didn't actually find any discussion of why it's important that it's an 8-pointed star versus a 5-pointed star, or a 12-pointed star, or anything like that. So if you have any information about why the fact that there's 8 points on it is important, let me know. In this card, something I had never noticed until I read in one of the books was all of these little flowers sprouting up. And I chose to color them as though they are dandelions, relating it a little bit to wishes. So some of them are yellow and some of them are white, like they've turned puffy. And so, but that's how this card originally incorporated that idea of hope and healing, was the new growth that's developing around this pool where she's pouring out the water. And so it was when I color these, I always learn something about the cards. There's just these little details you don't notice when the card is, this size versus this size, right? And I'm going to get the lighting thing down one of these days. Yeah. Some people talk about the bush. I never really got a clear understanding of the importance of the bush other than being a place where the bird could light. Which is why I didn't depict the bush in my card. But if you know anything about the bush, please do share it. I think that the 7 other stars are supposed to depict the 7 sisters, that constellation in the sky. Um, and you'll note that the water is being poured both into the pool and on the earth. So there's this idea that you are pouring out your spiritual gifts, both to support people emotionally and physically. So it's not just caring about others and the world around you out of some sense of obligation, or just taking care of their physical needs or taking care of their emotional needs, but you're taking care of the whole person. It's a whole healing, not a partial healing, that we're dealing with in the star. So this card is called the Daughter of the Firmament in the Golden Dawn. And this actually really associates it with Nut, who is the goddess of the sky or the firmament, the heavens, astrology. And so now I feel like I have to go down a rabbit hole and I have to study about Nut the Egyptian goddess of the sky, because she seems to be really related to this card. And um, so, yes, I haven't talked about the bird yet. So the bird is, by some call it aspiration or creativity. So it's that what you're wanting to accomplish. It also sometimes means a messenger. And so the star could denote a message of healing, or this could be creativity or inspiration that you're gaining. And those are ideas that come in with the bird, because the bird associated again with air, right? And air is your intellect, your mind at work. And this is where your um, mind is not just learning, not just education or communication, but it's about applying it to help people emotionally and physically, as we've talked about with the water being poured out on both land and water. And I do love that connection, which I discovered only 5 minutes before the broadcast about Newt, right? Let's see. Um, let's see. So this card also is associated with Saturn, Saturn being that card of boundaries or limitations, which I think is um, fitting, since this card is associated with the sky. And so that I mean, you can't really get further out than space where the stars are, right? I mean, sure, they go on forever and ever and ever, but we haven't found the end of them, right? So, really, it's kind of our boundary, which is an open boundary, hence that inspiration energy, that hope energy that we get, that kind of wishful energy, because the boundaries are limitless in this particular instance, because they are related to the sky. Let's see. I did talk a little bit about wishing. So a lot of people talk about which star this might be. Is this the North Star? Is this the star of the Magi? Um, you know, and for that reason, because it's obviously an important star, regardless of what star it is, they associate it with the wish, and so we get that idea that this might be related to that Nine of Cups, right? Um, and this will be our wish card in the majors. And we tend to find this. There are cards in the majors that have meanings that are associated with our minor arcana throughout. Um, some people associate stars with being like past souls. And this is an idea that comes up again and again about the star as a representative of our soul. And that's why in this card and in my own depiction, that star is within that. That is where your guidance is coming from. It's from the knowledge that you have gained up until now on the fool's journey, that guidance coming from within. And here, that idea of guidance. The stars historically have guided sailors and other travelers from place to place and back to home again, because of their placement of the constellations in the skies, bringing in that idea of guidance. The vessels, which I didn't talk about, the jars out of which the water is being poured. These are representative of our emotions or our subconscious. The spiritual gifts that we're pouring out, spirit being associated with water, um, to share with the world around us and heal it and bring it hope. And I'm only going to mention the Kabbalistic correspondences briefly because I want to study them further. But this card is associated with Zadi, which is the fish hook, and is on path 28 between Nezek and Yesod on the Tree of Life. This card we mentioned previously when we talked about the Emperor, because in most books about the Thoth and some others, they will switch the emperor and the star on the Tree of Life, which just doesn't make any sense to me in my reading. It doesn't really gel. But the path that it is on is between victory and the foundation, i.e., that area of dreaminess where we get all of our creative energy coming from victory. And so now we have this space, the star, where our creativity, our ideas, our inspiration are being fulfilled, right? The healing is happening, so to speak. Yeah. So let's talk about some keywords. We've mentioned a lot of them already. We've talked about hope and healing and inspiration. There's also this idea of serenity in this card. There is not a lot of chaos in it, right? It's very tranquil. We've talked about guidance. Um, Inner peace or inner light is the idea that comes up a lot. We see in this card in particular, but in other topics that we've talked about. The idea of beauty comes into play here. A lot of people associate the nudity of this card with the idea of beauty. And so beauty tends to be associated with this card, much like it is with the Empress and to a degree, the High Priestess. And so this card is often seen as a version of those cards, um, being more open and free than, say, in the previous cards where they were heavily clothed and had their bodies hidden from everyone. Um, I mentioned that this is a card of the soul. And so that's one of the reasons that I like that inner light idea that we talked about earlier. Um, the card can be about relief or optimism. It can be about good mental health, right? Like we actually have our thoughts together. We have our emotions together, and we're able to now help others. Hence, our pouring out of our gifts, of our emotions and whatnot to the world to heal it both emotionally and physically, um, is what we're looking at. Uh, So there's the idea of altruism, which I've hinted at, related to Aquarius, of helping the world around us, healing the world around us. Um, Definitely new life after the devil and the tower. And that sense of rejuvenation. That's something that was depicted really well in the Spirit Keepers Tarot's early editions. So, in the shadow side of the card, the things that we might see are doubt and fear. We might see a lack of faith, discouragement, maybe pessimism, um, basically negativity or um, ill health, particularly mental health, as this is related to our mind. It's an air card, right? So those are the ideas that I picked up this week, and I still want to study more in depthly the Kabbalistic aspects of it, which I've been working on for a long time. And because they different books have different connections for them, for this particular card, it's taken me a little longer than others to wrap my head around. And I also want to study Newt a little bit further and the correspondences there in relationship to this card. It's interesting that I'm studying this card this week because in my Cube of Space study, I'm actually studying the tower. And so it's interesting to uh, study both at the same time. So Ange has recommended a website about stuff, the imagery of the specific cards for us. So we'll check that out when we have an opportunity. So let's take a look and let's look at the card that I created. See if I can find it. Um, Trying to find, there we go. So initially, I mocked this card up really quickly on, I think it was like Wednesday. It was really early in the week for me to actually already be mocking up the card. But I just had this, I thought to myself, oh, wait, I just did the chariot and I used these symbols in the chariot, which also I could use in the star. And I got thinking, okay, well, and I did this in the moon card so I could really, draw on that as well. And so I started pulling images from various cards and I was like, okay, well, what's going to be the focal star, right? Because I haven't really done anything and I knew I wanted whatever it to be like my other cards. And I was thinking, well, this a lot of times that 8-pointed star that appears in the star is in the Hermit. And so I'm like, I need to figure out what star I want to use because I'll use it again. And I actually decided that this looked too much like it was framed than accomplishing what I wanted. I was wanting more of a light at the end of the tunnel effect, which is an idea that comes up with the star. And so I went with a more stone fixture, and I drew out some images from other cards. To create an image that I'm pretty well happy with. But I kept looking at it and I just wasn't quite satisfied. And so I played with making it bigger. I did add a different star later in the process. I also added the little dandelions. After I was coloring this card, I decided that I had to have the little dandelions there, and it connects it with the Ace of Swords in my deck, which has um, that energy in it, and also that image, and so I decided to go that route. I then played with the size, so you'll see. Oh, come on. So, in some of them, the image was larger or smaller, and I played with the sizing, trying to get that right. And and then finally, I decided, oh well, I think I need to remove that um, filter that I have over the sky there, which is what I did here. And let me know, do you like it with the filter, like with the sky being a little lighter at the top, or do you like it clear like this? The other thing that I began to think about was maybe that this was too dark surrounding it, and so I played with lightening it different ways. And I think this is going to be the final version of the card. But what say you of those three? What did you see that you liked and didn't like in the cards? This is why I'm doing this, to get your feedback. Yes, absolutely. I agree with you, Hannah. It could definitely be refusing to learn the lessons from the tower. Thank you for your input, Ange. Let's see. So I'm thinking that this is actually going to be the final version, at least for the moment. I may come back and add the tower once I figure out what the tower is going to be and look like back here in the corner, just kind of small in the background, like in the Spirit Keeper's Tarot. Because I could never find any information about the bush in the background. I didn't use the bush. I just put the bird in the sky. This felt familiar to me, particularly when I created the original image. And I don't know why. I feel like there's a card out there somewhere in a deck that resembles this, and I don't know what it is. So next week, Ange is going to be here, and it's that time where we pull the card that we're going to be working with. Let's see. Okay. If I'm not mistaken, this will be card 38, which means that in 2 weeks we'll be halfway with our cards. So yay. So, for those of you who are new or seeing this for the first time, I have been working with this deck, which was my very first RWS deck after that Golden Tarot that I shared earlier, and pulling from it each week. And so we don't get any repeats. We give it one more shuffle. Oh, look at the excitement. They're ready to go, I think. Cutting the cards. Oh, okay. All right. So we have the Two of Wands. So I can already see one thing that probably will happen with my card, which is in this card. Any of you who've seen my other wand cards know that I love that yellow background, and I tend to put it in my wand cards as well as my other fire associated cards if it's going to be outdoors. So we'll see what it looks like. But this is going to be oh my gosh, my poor brain. It's associated with Aries and Mars. Is that right? I have to study it again. So next week, Ange will be here and we'll be talking about this card. She'll share some of her favorite cards. We'll talk a little bit about them and what it means and the symbols, and also create my own card. So if you would like to give input about the card as I'm creating it each week, please do join Good Journeys into Tarot on Facebook, as well as follow me on Instagram so you can see the cards that I'm posting and the discussions I'm having along the way. For those of you who aren't already aware, we will on TikTok. I'm actually setting these cards to music with little keywords just to kind of put them out there and let people see them. And so all of them are actually up now. I actually had to play catch up because I got into TikTok a few months after I started this whole project. I don't think I have anything else going on this week, although 2 days after I'm Ange is here, I will be on her channel over at Tiny Trinkets and Tarot on the 3rd at 2 p.m. To talk about whatever might come up, right? Specifically creativity and the things that I do that are creative. Until next time, everybody, good journeys.